I felt my chest lock like it didn't belong to me anymore. The nurse leaned over and whispered, "Stay with us." Wires ran across my skin, monitors screaming in the background. The ear doctor picked up the phone. He called my parents. And the only words that came back were, "He's faking it." I wanted to sit up, rip the tubes out, and ask them if they really believed that. But I couldn't even lift my hand. Later that night, another call went out. "He might not make it through." Silence. No footsteps rushing through the doors. No one grabbing my hand like they used to when I was a kid. I turned 26 last month. You'd think by now I'd know not everyone who calls themselves family shows up when it counts. Still, hearing their voices dismiss me while machines kept me alive? That cut deeper than any rib injury or collapsed lung. The hours blurred together, medicine, breathing tubes, the steady hum of machines that cared more about me than the people who raised me. By morning I was still breathing, weak but alive. And I wasn't the one who felt shame in the room. Because the ER had recorded everything. Every word. Every denial. Every cruel laugh at the edge of my pain. When the nurse handed me the playback later, my hands shook, not from weakness but from knowing what I'd do next. I didn't need to raise my voice. Their own voices would destroy them. The nurse slid the small drive into my palm. "You'll need this," she said quietly, like handing me oxygen. It wasn't anger that moved through me. It was something colder. Something steady. I stayed another 2 nights under observation. The doctors ran scans, checked vitals, charted progress. But I wasn't just healing, I was planning. I emailed the files to myself first. Then, one by one, I sent them to the people who mattered most. My family's lawyer. My aunt in Ohio who always suspected something. And finally, the county clerk who handled medical affidavits for court. It didn't take long. By the time I was discharged, whispers had started. A lawyer called, his voice stiff. "We received evidence regarding your family's response to the emergency call." I didn't say much. Just asked him to keep it safe. Back home, I set the drive on the counter and stared at it. That little piece of plastic held everything. Proof that when life sat on the edge, they chose to step away. 2 days later, I got a knock at the door. It wasn't my family. It was an officer. Calm, professional, carrying a clipboard. "We're looking into neglect," he explained. "We'd like to confirm a few things." I nodded, pulled the chair out, and let him in. For the first time since the hospital bed, I felt the air in my lungs again. Not because I was free, but because the truth was finally out of my hands. That night, I slept with the drive still on the table. It was more than evidence, it was my shield. The first call came early in the morning. A detective's voice, clipped and sharp. "We've interviewed your parents. They're denying everything. But the recordings speak for themselves." I leaned against the kitchen counter, the phone warm in my hand. "Then you know the truth," I said quietly. He didn't argue. He just told me the next steps. Depositions, hearings, the kind of formal words that turn silence into evidence. Later that week, I sat in a courthouse hallway, hospital bracelet still loose around my wrist. Across from me, my family waited with folded arms and cold stares. They didn't even look shaken, at least not until the clerk wheeled in a monitor. The playback started. My mother's voice. "He's faking it." Then my father's. "He's dramatic. He'll be fine." And finally, the line that hung in the air like a weight. "He might not make it through the night." The room shifted. The judge leaned forward. My lawyer scribbled notes, but I didn't need them. The truth was playing out louder than any defense. My sister whispered something to my mother, but even she flinched when the audio replayed. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small sitting across from them. I didn't feel weak or discarded. I felt steady, like the tables had finally turned without me lifting a finger. When the session ended, the judge's only words were simple. "We'll continue tomorrow. Bring all parties back." I walked out slowly, the sound of their voices still echoing through the courtroom speakers. That day, I understood. Some things break on their own when you let people speak long enough. By the next morning, the story had already slipped beyond the courthouse walls. Someone leaked the recordings. Maybe a clerk, maybe a reporter. I never asked. All I know is I walked into the diner on Main Street and every head turned. Not at me but at the whispers. "That's his parents, right? Did you hear what they said while he was in the ER?" The waitress set down my coffee with shaky hands. "I'm sorry, Han," she murmured, though she had nothing to do with it. In a small town, reputation spread faster than smoke. My family had spent years building an image, generous, respectable, untouchable. Now their words were everywhere. Not polished statements, not excuses, just raw recordings of them choosing denial over their own son's life. That afternoon my phone buzzed. An old neighbor left a voicemail. Never thought I'd say this, but we were wrong about them. Stay strong, kid. The truth didn't just hit the courthouse anymore. It hit the grocery line, the church pews, the gas station conversations. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just kept quiet, letting their voices do the work. By the second hearing, their lawyer looked worn out. He avoided eye contact when the judge asked why no one came to the ER. My father shifted in his seat. My mother pressed her lips thin. But silence doesn't build defenses. And the cracks were showing. That night, I sat on my porch, the summer air heavy, the phone still buzzing with messages I hadn't opened. I didn't need anyone's sympathy. Watching the masks fall off was enough. The courthouse felt different that morning. Their lawyer didn't stride in with confidence anymore. He walked in slow, carrying a stack of folders like they were too heavy. When the judge entered, the room hushed. The playback was already on record, but today it wasn't about what they said, it was about what they didn't do. The prosecutor laid it out clean. Emergency neglect. Failure to render aid. Breach of basic duty. My parents shifted in their seats. My sister tapped her nails against the table, fast and nervous. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. Their own attorney stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "Given the evidence, my clients understand a settlement discussion may be appropriate." The words landed like a crack of thunder. Settlement. The same parents who once told me I exaggerated everything, who thought silence would protect them, were now scrambling for deals. After court, I walked outside into the bright sun. A neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years crossed the street toward me. "You don't have to say anything," he said, shaking his head. "We've all heard it. We know." Later I checked my email. An aunt who once defended them had sent a single line. "They can't hide anymore." Their circle was shrinking. The same friends and relatives who used to stand shoulder to shoulder with them were pulling back, afraid of the stain. For once, I didn't feel like I had to fight. The truth was doing it all for me. I poured myself a glass of water that night and sat in silence, realizing something simple. Justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes in the quiet collapse of everything false. 2 days later, their lawyer called for a private meeting. I sat across the table, a pitcher of water between us. He cleared his throat. "Your parents are willing to offer financial restitution." Quietly. No press. No further hearings. I didn't speak right away. I just let the silence stretch. He shifted in his chair, papers sliding under his hand. "Say a number," he finally urged. I leaned back, my ribs still sore but healing. "You think this is about money?" He blinked, thrown off. Because it wasn't. It was about truth. And truth doesn't take a payoff. The next day, word spread fast. No deal had been reached. By afternoon, their lawyer withdrew from the case altogether. Couldn't represent them, not with evidence that strong. At the next hearing, they sat alone, stripped of polished defenses. My father's jaw was tight, his eyes darting between the judge and the empty chair where his attorney should have been. My mother kept looking down, clutching a folder like it could shield her. The judge didn't need long. "Proceedings will continue. Evidence remains admissible. And until further notice, community testimony will be recorded." Community testimony. That was the final blow. Because everyone they'd once leaned on, neighbors, cousins, church friends, had already heard the recordings. Now they'd have to stand in front of them, exposed. That evening, I walked home slow, the courthouse steps behind me. The sky was turning orange, the kind of sunset I used to sit and watch with them. But now, everything had shifted. The house they built, the name they guarded, the silence they thought was protection. It was all cracking open. And I didn't have to lift a hand. The courthouse benches were packed this time. Neighbors, old classmates, people I hadn't seen in years filled the rows. Some leaned forward, arms crossed. Others whispered, shaking their heads. The judge called the first witness. It wasn't a lawyer or an expert. It was Mr. Lewis, the man who lived 2 houses down from my parents for 30 years. He stood, voice steady. We all heard those recordings. And if that's what they said when his life was on the line, then they don't deserve the trust of this community. A ripple went through the room. My mother shifted uncomfortably, my father's face turning pale. One by one, others followed. An old teacher. A former family friend. Even a cousin who once defended them. Each spoke, not with anger but with disappointment. They called him dramatic. They called him a liar. I can't stand by that. Every word piled higher than any argument their defense could make. I sat quietly, listening. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just let the truth fill the air until it felt too heavy for them to breathe. By the end of the day, the judge leaned back, tapping a pen against the desk. This is no longer a matter of doubt. he said firmly. This is a matter of accountability. Walking out of that courthouse, the air felt lighter. Not because the fight was finished, but because the burden wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to them, their voices, their choices, their silence when it mattered most. That night, I sat alone on my porch and realized something simple. Sometimes justice isn't handed down from above. Sometimes it rises from the people who finally see the truth. The final session didn't drag on. No lawyers stood beside them. No neighbors came to defend them. It was just my parents, my sister, and the silence of a courtroom that had already decided. The judge spoke clearly. The recordings, combined with community testimony, show a pattern of neglect. This court cannot ignore it. Pens scratched against paper. Orders were signed. Their reputations, once so carefully guarded, were sealed in legal record. When the gavel struck, I didn't feel triumph. I felt something quieter. A release. Outside, the courthouse steps were lined with people. Some nodded at me, some just looked away from them. My parents walked past with lowered heads, the same people who once waved proudly at every block party now avoiding every eye. At home, I set the drive back on the table. The same one the nurse had given me in the hospital. The same one that carried their undoing. I didn't need to play it anymore. I didn't need to send it again. The truth had already done its work. Weeks later, I drove past the church where they used to sit in the front row. Their seats were empty. The town had moved on without them. And me? I was still here. Breathing. Healing. Standing. What they tried to bury as weakness had become the strongest thing I ever held. Proof that I didn't have to scream for justice. I just had to let silence speak. That was the day I finally let the weight go.